is that Ignite connected me to many, many more people than I could have through, let's say, the recruitment work. Um, but then Cardiff Red connected me to people, and they overlapped with other people. And then the Instagrammers Cardiff connected me to people, and then I got involved with Creative Mornings Cardiff, and so I'd urge everyone to, if you've got a real interest and a passion for something, it's a really good idea to start a side project or a thing where you're at the center of it, because then people will come to you and you become renowned for that thing. And if you want to, succeed in a creative space, then doing a creative thing that is not for profit, or just doing it because you can do it, is a really good idea, and you learn so much through doing it as well.
Hello, and welcome to episode 5 of How Do You End Up Doing That with me, Alex Jeffers. This podcast is all about speaking to people about jobs they've ended up doing and what got them into doing it, because usually people have got a bit of a story to tell about how they ended up doing what they're doing if it's slightly out of the ordinary. This week's episode is with Steve Dimmick, who started his career as an engineer and currently works as the commercial director for Awen Cultural Trust. Prior to this, however, Steve was one of the founding members of DooPoll, which is probably what he's best known for in the startup world. Steve was also the host of Ignite and has been involved in many other networking and social events based in and around Cardiff. I've known Steve for a long time, and even I was surprised at how varied and jumbled his career path has been. We talk about some of the bad decisions he made when he was at school and how that ended up shaping his career in the short term, but ultimately how it didn't define his choices in the long run. During the recording, we went off on a massive tangent, and Steve read one of his dad's poems that he had written. It didn't really flow with any part of the conversation after I'd edited it down, but I've included it after the outro music if you want to have a listen to that. If you listen to this and you've got any comments or feedback, anything you'd like to say to me really, feel free to drop me an email to alex@howdyou.com. That's HOWDYOU.com. And I'll take a look at any emails that come across, and hopefully I can get back to you with some answers. So let's get stuck into our conversation with Steve. Cheers! Hello, Steve. How's it going?
Good morning, sir. Good to see you again. How are you doing?
Yeah, all good, mate. All good. It's been quite some time, hasn't it, since we last were in a room together. I think from those years ago,
I
working
think
out
that's a
the
good way of putting it. It makes it sound like it was some
yeah.
dark and seedy room. Maybe it was.
Well, it was. I feel like it was the Indie Cube down the bay, and then the one in the centre of town. Not
Yes, Trade
dark
Street.
rooms, but not particularly nice rooms. Especially the one in St. Nine House, which constantly had a leak on the first
Yes.
floor.
Yeah.
Despite being a 4-story building, the water would come in through just the first floor. But yeah, no, cheers for jumping on the call, Steve. Thanks very much. So, yeah, do you want to give us a quick introduction as to who you are, what it is you do?
Yep. So Steve Dimmick, Adui. I'm Steve Dimmick. I'm a proud Valleys boy who grew up in a little town called Blaenau in Gwent. And I'm sure we'll talk about a lot of the stuff that's happened since then. But nowadays, I'm a nearly 50-year-old, father of 3, ex-CEO of 1, or 2 or 3, and gladly and happily living in Cardiff, and yeah, having a good time with life.
Cool. So, what is your current job role at the moment? What is it? What is the? I can see on the screen it says commercial director, but
Yeah,
is that
so
accurate?
yeah, that's pretty good. I think well, that's my job title.
Okay.
So I am 1 year and 9 days into my new role as commercial director with Awen Cultural Trust. We are a charity that runs a trading organisation underneath it, and we run theatres, libraries, music venues, community centres, a country hotel, and a few other bits and bobs on behalf of local councils, so primarily Bridgend, Blaenau Gwent, and Rhondda Cynon Taf. The take that we make from our theatres, our bars, etc., is put through the trading company, and then we gift aid that profit back to the charity. And it's a very circular kind of organisation. And the good news is that the profit that is gift aided back helps us then to run our charitable projects. The two kind of flagship ones are called Bee Leaf and Wood Bee, and they are a horticultural and gardening centre and a carpentry kind of workshop for adults with learning disabilities. So it's a really, really wholesome
Yeah.
setup. Yeah.
Very, very nature, hotel, community. It sounds far too wholesome for you, if I'm honest.
I mean, I don't know where to start taking offence at that. Um, yeah,
No, I'm
so
only joking. I'm only
no,
joking,
no,
of
it's
course.
cool. I think that for me, having been in the um, pretty kind of full-on industry of SaaS software for 8 years of my life and all that went with it, I wanted a job. Oh God, I'm going to sound cliched and very cheesy and middle-aged here, but I wanted a job that was giving something back. I grew up, as I said earlier, in the valleys with surrounded by amazing countryside and nature and wildlife. My dad was a fisherman, and so getting back into nature and having 100-acre country park as the backdrop to the office is a great thing for me. And literally, the businesses or the organisation's purpose is to make people's lives better. And from our time at Ignite, from the work I've done with my book clubs and everything else, I think that's a strong, like, goes through me like a stick of rock, is that I like to make people feel better, however I can. And so this felt like a really good fit.
Oh, yeah, it sounds definitely like the right sort of fit for you. But we'll get into it a bit later. But as long as I've known you, you've always been self-employed,
Yeah.
doing things for yourself. You've always been very much more of a out on your own kind of guy.
Hmm.
Lots of odd things that I think have cropped up over the years of knowing you, including one point I think someone said, "Oh, have you had Steve's bought a field?" What? But yeah, so we'll get onto that a bit later. But I think if we let's rewind all the way back to the start. Go about school. So you went to school in Blina.
Yeah.
What sort of qualifications were you studying for? How did you find school? Was it enjoyable? Were you one of the cool kids or not?
For me, growing up in Blina was it was fantastic. Looking back, I had incredible parents. My mum's still with me. My dad sadly passed away back in 2006. Dad used to work at the mine at Roseaworth. Mum was a housewife looking after the kids. Thatcher came along and did what she did, and Dad went from odd job to odd job. Mum went back into employment and worked at social services. And yeah, Dad, found it tough. His mental health, before we called it that, was a real challenge. And Dad was prescribed Prozac, I think, early in his 50s, and was dead before he was 60. So, sorry, at 60. So it was, a brilliant home with my brother and sister there as well. Yeah, I had a great bunch of mates. We lived right in the middle of the town, population of about 3,000, I think, back then. And I had a great time, and we were out to play for the majority. When I think back to my childhood, it is me running around on the tip, which is what was out the back of our house. And it's the old coal tip that had been grassed over, and building bonfires and climbing the big wheel, which was literally the old coal mining wheel on the tip, grass slides, and um, building dams in rivers, and going off and jumping off bridges and taking our BMXs and breaking arms and legs and whatever else. Um,
Proper countryside living then. Proper.
yeah, pretty feral, and yeah, and every now and then you'd catch the X15 to Newport to try and buy, a cool pair of jeans or something. Or if you were really lucky, or your parents were rich, you might go to Cardiff. Um, so yeah, it was a brilliant place. Qualifications wise, I really enjoyed school. Like all teenage kids, there were bumps in the road, and I was definitely not one of the cool kids. I was a SWAT, is what we would have called it back then. But I loved sport, and I played rugby, and I was in the school rugby team, and I got to play for the county, luckily enough. But I also tried other stuff, so I was the only lad from our school that went for a trial for the county hockey squad. And just I was always open to stuff, or scouts as well. I should mention that I was a proud cub and scout, and
Dib 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 dob dob dob.
I got the shit ripped out of me every week for that. Yeah, exactly. Dib dib dob dob. But I was the one that was going abseiling. I was the one that was going canoeing. I was the one going camping, and
Yeah.
everyone else would just hang around in the town. And I look back, and I know it wasn't cool. But I'm really really glad I did it because I learned so much, and that love of nature was fostered through that as well.
Yeah, I think that sort of like the Scouts definitely Scouts, Cubs, Beavers, Brownies, all of those sorts of organisations. They go through like phases of you're young and you think it's really cool because you're in a club and you get to do all this stuff. You get into a teenager and suddenly it's not very cool. But then you
Mm.
get to an adult and you're like, hang on, all that stuff that I was doing as a teenager that everyone else was like, that's not cool. It was actually really cool, and as an adult, you really wish you'd done more of that stuff, despite it at the time being like people mocking you for it.
Yeah, and there was a trade off. Yeah, so I remember the toughest one for kids like me, and I can Craig Nash, Leon Chambers. A few of the other lads I remember was Armistice Day. So and basically having to do the parade and be there, and you weren't allowed to wear your coat, and you had to show your woggle, and you had to have your beret on, and all of this stuff. And your mates from the rugby team, or the cool kids basically,
Yeah.
would be laughing their heads off at you, and you're there, with a jazz band at the front and laying wreaths and all of this stuff. Well, as a teenager, that's it's tough stuff, and it did, and then you've got to face that feeling of shame and understand. Well, I didn't understand why I was ashamed. I couldn't cope with it, but I loved abseiling. I loved messing around. I loved learning how to tie knots, and all of the good stuff that went with it. And so, yeah, I persisted, and it was good. So yeah, all of that, I would say that was my education.
Hmm.
Looking back, that was much more my education than the fact I got 10 GCSEs, and at the second attempt I got my A levels. So I there's a fun story here. Another advice for kids option is that I was going out with a lovely girl called Claire Jane Dunn, and she chose maths, physics, chemistry for A levels. I was a languages like boy. I got an A in French, an A in German, but I struggled with physics and chemistry, B and a C. But I was in love with Claire Dunn, so I want to do what Claire Dunn's doing. Sure enough, Claire Dunn finished with me in the summer holidays, and I then had the perjury of 2 years sitting with a girl who no longer wanted me, doing a topic I no longer had any real interest, and I failed. And then I sat it again, and I scraped by and got enough to get me into Swansea University. So I did and of course, I was then set on that course, and I ended up doing chemical and biochemical engineering, and getting a master's degree in that.
Was there a reason why you decided? So you've did your A levels, obviously, in a subject that you were particularly interested in, but then to then continue that through to do a degree in it, and not decide at that point I should do something, maybe do a different course in college, or do a just avoid the university route altogether, go into something more vocational. What was the kind of the thinking there?
Yeah, so 2020 in retrospect is reasonably easy, and I think the context is that I was the first child from my family to go, and that means of the 18 cousins I had, I was the first of us to go to university. Of the 120 kids in our year at school, I think only about 20 went to university. So we were not a high performing school, um, and yeah, that was just part of the course. So, and my mum and dad hadn't gone to university either. So there was a very kind of linear way of thinking. And at no point did I think, well, my passion was for French, really. And
Hmm.
I quite kind of like German. And now I'm a Francophile, and at university I went out and I spent time living in France, and I'm still in touch with the people that I met 25 years ago, and was back there the year before last to kind of meet up with them. But I didn't have that non-linear thinking back then, and it was very much like prescribed. If you're doing this, then you should be doing that. And I think the benefit I have now is with my children, I'm able to say, A, don't choose what your current love interest is choosing, choose what you love. And secondly, you can change course. You can change your mind, and you don't have to follow the path that you believe is the one you should.
Yeah. So if you are having second thoughts about something, it's not too late to change. And at the time, I guess when you're 18, 19, suddenly you sort of think, "Oh, everything's happening, and I've got to make decisions, and I've got to decide which route to take, and I've got to set on that course, and it's too late to go back and change my mind because I've just got out of this." Yeah, I can see how that would be quite scary to then just like, actually I made a mistake and I need to go back and redo it. But it's not too late, and I think you only really appreciate that as you get older, that
Yeah,
it's really not too late to kind of redo some stuff.
exactly that. Now I've learned French, and I've kept the French going.
Mhm.
I've learned the Welsh language, and so my passion for words and languages, it persists. And I haven't, as you know, I haven't persisted with chemical engineering. Far from it. I'm not a Walter White. Let's put it that way.
I was thinking there's definitely a joke there about, I don't know, nightclubs around Cardiff in the 90s. Okay, cool. So you've gone through university, come out of there with a degree you didn't want or didn't know how to use by the end of it.
I think that back then, look, university is transformative. Did you go to uni?
No, no, I never went.
No. I would say that whilst I said the main learning I got from Bliner was all the stuff that was out to play,
Hmm.
um, the main learning from university, and I think most people would say this, is the ability to interact and engage with different people from a diverse background, and realize that your own worth, your self worth, and I came pretty much top of my class in year one at university, having gone in thinking I've scraped through here. I'm going to be struggling, I'm going to be, and I was in the top 10%. Ended up getting a 2-1, and I had a Viva for a first and all of that stuff. And nowadays, I look back and it doesn't matter a jot to
Right.
me. But back then, it obviously was super important, and I was gutted not to have got first. But if you'd said that to me when I was picking up my failed results off my first set of A levels, I would have said you were joking. There was no way that I could have been, fast forward 4 years or 5 years, and I would have been in that situation. So yeah, I think at the end I was really proud of it, and honestly, that linear mindset was still there, and the only goal in that final year at university was to get onto a graduate management scheme. And so there's a thing called a milk round, where all the big companies come around and they literally pick up the bright students, basically. And I remember I did that for ICI, and I went up to Leeds to do their booty parade at their factory up in Leeds, and ended up sleeping on a train station in Stratford on the way home because the trains had run late. But that was a fun experience the same. I did it with Tate and Lyle, and I failed both of those. But then I got on with Atkins, and Atkins are the largest engineering consultancy in the world. And so it was, at that point, it was just what I wanted. So I thought,
And I guess at the time, there's the largest management consultancy in the world. I guess you've got opportunities to travel, and for someone who inherently actually really likes languages, I can imagine that was actually quite an
yeah,
appealing option there.
yeah, that was, and it did happen. We went over to Paris to meet with Bouygues, one of the other big engineering consultancies that were working on an oil rig design that I was focused on. And we got to meet them at the Jardin Tuileries, and it was great. But I think that for anyone listening, ultimately, when you join a large corporation as a graduate, or certainly 25 years ago, I was joining as a management consultant, and the only thing I managed to consult was Excel spreadsheets, literally day after day after day. And this is, way before, let's say, Excel or any spreadsheet is such as it is now. And so we would, and this is God's honest truth, we would set a spreadsheet to run overnight. So I would do my work and then leave, and you'd kind of press go, and then it would start doing the calculations. And there
Right.
were that many calculations that I'd come in the next morning, and sometimes it would still be running. So it's crazy now thinking back, the speed of everything now, thinking back to those days.
So management consultant, you are an Excel monkey.
Yeah,
Let's say, going through that. What was that? You sort of like your day to day. How long did you stick at it?
Yeah, so I went there in September 98, graduated in June 98, went up to London, Dick Whittington-esque. and worked on Tottenham Court Road at their offices there. Big 11th story, glass and steel,
Nice.
looking out over the city on 18 grand, I think,
Okay.
was my starting salary.
And what year
Um,
was this?
1988, sorry, 1998. Yeah.
98. So 18 grand in 98 would have been quite a
Yeah, I think,
reasonable salary,
it
yeah.
was a reasonable one. And within, well, yeah, I'll get to that bit now. But I was there for, so starting in September, it would have been about 6 or 9 months, and the price of oil. So I was mainly working in the oil and gas department, and the price of oil dropped to under $10 a barrel, and Atkins had to take some drastic actions, and that meant closing the Tottenham Court Road office because the rent was too high.
Okay.
Um, so, Steve, you have the option of going to our headquarters in Epsom, or you can go to Golden Square in Aberdeen, which is closest to the rigs, and
Okay.
that's where we do the more kind of technical elements. So I chose Aberdeen and went up to Aberdeen in July of '99 and got put up in digs there, and to find my feet, all that. Joined the local rugby club, had a brilliant time with Gordonians in pre-season rugby, and but was going in, and again, XL Monkey. My advice to people from my time with Atkins in Aberdeen is when you're laying out an office, don't put desks in the corner, face in the corners. If you have 4 desks in a square room,
Yeah.
put them in the middle so that everyone can see each other and talk.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, and that was the setup. I kid you not. Beautiful old building on Golden Square, which is like I think it's actually renowned for being like the queer joint or catch up place in the evenings. But anyway, it's where all the oil and gas engineering people are. And that was the setup. And the other memory I have is that at lunchtime, I used to get up and go out and walk around the Granite City. But the other people in that room would play Doom. So it's like be an XL monkey for 4 hours, and then Martin, the boss, would say, "Right, should we have a game?" And then they'd all basically put Doom on for 3/4 an hour, play Doom, and then switch back to XL. It's just like that wasn't a great experience, that bit. So there's a funny story here though, where I came into work. Sorry, and I should say before I left, I had a bit of a. I mean, this is a bit. Looking back, I don't know what I was thinking. I was probably a uh, bit too proud of myself, but I had like a leave-in party for me going leaving London.
Okay.
I'd only been there for like 6 months or something.
Did you organise your own
Anyway,
leaving party?
yeah.
Right.
So, um, so at this leaving party, a lad who I'd also joined a rugby club in London, and a guy called Tom Craven, who was the fullback, came along, and he just started his own recruitment business. And Tom kind of said, "You're mad. You're going to hate it. You shouldn't go. Why don't you come and work for us?" And I was just like, "Nah, not going to do it. Not going to do it." And fair play, Tom. On the first of each month, he contacted me. How's it going? Are you still enjoying it? Any second thoughts? And he did that month after month.
Sounds like a recruiter, Steve.
Say again.
Sounds like a recruiter.
Well, exactly. And then on the 1st of November '99, I walked into work in Aberdeen, and I kid you not, I had about a foot of snow on my head by the time I got there. And I got in, and the email was there, and I was like, "Yeah, I am into this." I've had enough of not playing Doom and walking around in the rain and generally being freezing, even though the rugby club was good. And actually, my love for engineering wasn't there. It
Yeah.
was just in London. One of the bosses said, "In 20 years, Steve, you could be in my role." I thought, "Oh my god, that's
That
my entire life."
that
But
would,
again,
yeah. There's nothing more scary than being told by someone in charge of you in a job you hate that in at some point you'll be sitting in my chair. I'm out.
yeah,
I am done. Like,
exactly. And I think that was the beginning of the end of it. So I basically decided, right, I'm done. And then and I think all of us have had this moment in our lives where I had to write a resignation letter
mm,
for the first time, and you overthink it, don't you? You think, oh, ultimately, you just for people here, don't hold back. Just go and tell someone. You don't have to come up with some grandiose letter that's got
uh,
fancy words in it. So I print off this letter, and I walk to the office printer, and as I get there, the boss Martin is there, and he's printed something off as well. So I'm just like, hell. Um, uh, and he goes, "Oh, this one's for you, is it, Steve?" And he gives it to me, and then he goes, "Well, actually, this one's for you as well." And he gives it to me, and it was a pay rise
Oh,
to 24 grand, and I was just like, "Oh!" And so I'm holding these two pieces of paper, and I fair play. I'm proud of it. I said, "Actually, I'm sorry, Martin. I'm really grateful for this, but I'm giving you this."
yeah.
And he was a bit shocked, and so off I went back to London to join Dome Recruitment.
So what was it that made you think? Obviously you've got your mate who's sort of telling you you're good at it. Was there anything else about recruitment that made you think, oh, I like the idea of having a chat with people, helping people out, so because you've said earlier that you had everything that you do, kind of helping people out and being involved in that aspect of things runs through everything you do. Recruitment is, of course, helping people out, getting people jobs, having a chat with people, being sociable. Would you say the two kind of that kind of influenced your decision, or was it just because you didn't want to be cold and wet?
I mean, basically, you've just answered it, haven't you? And I've never thought of it in those terms before. But that's what I was doing. I was helping people out, and of course, when people think of a recruitment consultant, I think generally it's not a great framing of they're up there with car salesmen and double glazing people, estate agents.
I did hear something before about a guy. A guy said, I'm, I love my job, but I'm probably the most hated man in the world. I'm a recruiter who specialises in estate agents."
Yeah, I bet he's got some stories though.
Probably, yeah.
I would wager that. So look, I think that was it, and that's how Tom pushed it to me, and I loved it basically. I think it had started by we had an away match against Lewis on the south coast, and it was my first game for the firsts. And on the bus on the way back, I ended up at the front of the bus, emceeing the journey back to London, basically. And a lot of these old kind of blues were just like, "Who the heck's this kid? That's suddenly, who does he think he is?" And I just remember, I can't remember, just kind of getting people up to sing or whatever it was, or tell a story, tell a joke. And Tom saw something in that said to him, like, this guy can, he can communicate, he
Yeah.
can engage with people, he's persuasive, and he was willing to roll the dice.
Okay.
And also they were just starting out, so I got back for the interview. I remember it. They're both ex-army, so Tom and Steve O'Neill, and they'd managed to get an office in, I don't know what it was, like some kind of RAF, or I don't know. But basically, I went into this building, and there was a double staircase going up that peeled off to both sides. I was just like, big red carpet, Axminster carpet going up it,
Yeah.
wood panelled walls. And I walk into the office, picture of the Queen over the fireplace in the office. I was just like, "Oh, I'm not into that."
Yeah. It's a bit much.
And sorry, sorry for any royalists listening, but not my bag. But went in, and I really liked them. And yeah, for me, it was all about the opportunity to engage with people and consult people, not excel. It's as simple as that. And there was, I should add, the carrot of money.
Okay.
And I'd racked up decent debts at university, and Atkins, whilst paying reasonably well, it could have been a lot better. And that was the promised land of recruitment. Yeah, and that came good.
What kind of training or sort of skills did you kind of get in that, or was it more thrown into the deep end?
I don't think Tom or Steve would mind me saying, they were new to it, and so they did invest in it, and but I at that point it was proper valleys, yeah. So I talked like that, and it would be right. Hiya, Mister High Flying Investment Banker up in Canary Wharf. Steve Dimmick here from and they'd just hang up on me every time. So I'd be calling, and it was attritional. And I would say, and I have said, I think that's why my accent has flattened, is that it was through those cuts and bruises that I got by getting hung up on over and over again, that subconsciously I think I was trying to talk posh, as I thought of it back then. And yeah, and so they, I remember the first ever call I made out. So this is God, I'm going to show my age here. They gave me the phone book, and it was just like pick any company, and so I just picked the company, picked up the phone, called it, and it was a recruitment agency. And it was kind of like, I don't know if you ever heard, there was a Scott Mills thing where he calls a Chinese restaurant and then he connects them to another Chinese
Yes,
restaurant.
yeah, yeah, I remember that.
They're
Yeah.
kind of talking to each other. So it was kind of like that. And neither of us was getting anywhere basically. So it took me 6 months to make my first placement, which I then went on to run recruitment businesses. And uh, I was going to say I would never. I maybe only afforded one person that kind of patience in all my time running a recruitment agency, and they were really patient with me, and I'll be perennially grateful for that. And look, I ended up staying with them for 12 years,
Okay.
5 of them in London and 7 back in Cardiff,
Right.
and it was, you know, I'm not going to say the making of me because it takes lots of pieces to create a jigsaw, but you learn a lot doing that kind of job
Yeah, yeah.
about yourself.
I can imagine. I can imagine. I've personally, the idea of cold calling fills me with so much fear and dread that I'd cry and curl up into a ball if I had to pick up the phone and try and do the cold sell to someone. So yeah, it's a real skill and art and perseverance to be able to do that. But then, so you did that in London, and then you said you
Yeah.
moved back to Cardiff after 5 years. What was the deal there with did they trust you to open an office in Cardiff or?
We were doing well in London. I think we were up to 35 staff in an office in Putney. But in 2001, I met who is now my ex-wife, but met with Ellen. And, we got together. Yeah, by 2004, we were living then in West London, and it was just like right time to we want to start a family, and we don't want to start a family in London.
Okay.
Ellen had grown up in Nantlla in North Wales. I grew up in Blaenau in South Wales. We both living in London. We both wanted city life. We didn't want to go back to the sticks, as it were. And I think we both needed, we wanted that career element as well. And so, yeah, we come back in 2004 and got a little place in Canton. Yeah, so that was what brought us back, basically. And it was on the basis of at that time I was the high biller. I was the top performer for Dome at that time, and I knew I had the ability to say, use me or lose me, basically. So
Okay.
I need to move back to Wales. You've talked about setting up a second office. 2 of the directors at that point were from Leeds, so I think there was an interest in doing it in Leeds, and I think I just forced their hand a little, really. And so started from the back bedroom, and then eventually moved into some offices on Cathedral Road.
Cool. So then you did that for 7 years, 5 years, 7 years.
Yeah, so back in Wales. So yeah, back in Cardiff in 2004, and then it would have been 2011. I eventually, I stayed with them. Sorry, until 2009, and then set up my own thing in 2009. So there was a financial crash in 2008, 2009. And towards in that period, I had about 10 people working for me, but I was getting calls from London. And in Cardiff, we were doing quite well. Um, but in London, they were like really, really suffering. And so that office there went from 35 down to 20 overnight. And then it was whittling away. And so I was literally getting the call saying, you need to sack this person. You need to sack that person. And I was just like, but they've hit target for the last 3 months running. And they're just saying, no, I can't do it. So eventually it was me and one graduate lad who we were paying, peppercorn salary to, and then he left, and then it was me on. I remember for a period I was on 50% of whatever you bring in,
Right.
so no salary. And fair play to Ellen, my ex-wife. She said, "But Steve, if you did your own thing, you'd be on 100%.
Yeah.
Why don't you got 10 years experience? Why don't you start your own thing?" And that's what caused me then to kind of say, right, chips in, I'm done.
Yeah.
Thanks for the support, but I can't go on like that. And so I set my own recruitment consultancy then.
And they were like you left on good terms with the guys there.
Yeah, I'm still, still mates with them
Mhm.
and catch up with them from time to time. They're just top people.
So you start up your own thing, which was Dimmick's
Yeah, well done.
Recruitment, the home of the video job ad, I believe.
Well, see, look, you've done more research on this than me. So yes,
I
this
just
was
remember
exciting,
that.
actually. And I think this was, by definition, this was the naissance of my entrepreneurial streak, I guess. So this is where it came through, and the idea was to go into our clients and film the people talking about what they needed. And so job specs were, you know, identikit. You couldn't tell one from the other. But so often, candidates would say to me, well, I'm not sure, the job isn't, it just looks like every other job, but that boss is amazing.
Yeah.
And I want to join that company because of that boss. I worked with Mark Heatley to build a website. And I went up to London with Lloyd Morgan from Rockadove, and we went around London filming with some various different clients. And yeah, there was some fun moments. Yeah, so I'd mainly been recruiting for digital people all my career to that point. But obviously, at this point, I had to take whatever I could get. And once we were in situ, you needed to make as much, uh, take as much footage and jobs as you could. And I remember taking one for an accountant, and I was thinking, oh God, I don't know how to recruit for an accountant. But the guy, the chief finance officer, was brilliant. He just said, you've got to be good enough to be able to come in on a Friday when these lot, and he pointed behind him, when these lot are all still drunk from the night before and off their faces, and you've got to be able to get their numbers from them and get them into something coherent. So that's what we're looking for. And I was just like, and suddenly, you know, seeing that as an accountant, that would either scare you and make you want to run a million
Yeah.
miles, or be like, oh my God, I want to work there, you know. And so I felt it had real potential. But the other element at play here was that, and I was still doing normal recruitment. Yeah. So that was I was trying to scale that. I guess this is what I would call it now, but I would never say it in those days. So I was trying to kind of find a market for that and the market proposition and get the market fit for it right. But in the background, I was still doing your everyday kind of recruitment and posting jobs on job boards and whatnot. But the main reason for all of this was that by now, the second child had arrived. So I had a daughter, Edis, in 2007, son Clay in 2009, and they were both growing up, and it was pretty challenging. And I was trying to help out by doing more stuff around the house. So it gave me that flexibility. Where, to be fair, with the other, with Dome, it's not like anyone was checking on me. But psychologically, when you're working for someone, or certainly I feel like this, you feel like you need to be there and doing the hours and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Because I think I quite regularly think, looking at my two kids, looking at my career, I don't understand how people with actual jobs do this. Like
Mm.
I just don't get it. How can you have a full time job that is reliant on someone else and have to answer to someone else and not just be able to take the afternoon off because your kid needs you?
Yeah,
Like you just if the kids are sick or they've got an inset day or something, it's like, all right, that's fine. They're just downstairs. I'll just catch up in the evening. Whereas if you had a job and you had to go somewhere and there was people who relied on you when you've got young children, it blows my mind how people manage to do it.
yeah.
Because my job is, I don't think of my job as a real job half the time, building websites for people. Cool. So you went, you were trying to scale that business up, and it was a success because you did that for quite a few years, really, didn't you?
Yeah, so I kept that going, and I kept it in tandem with some other stuff that I ended up doing then. So even actually, we're jumping ahead a little here, but whilst I started DooPoll, I was able to kind of keep. I'll talk about that separately, but I was able to keep a bit of a recruitment thing going at the start of that as well. And I had part of my contract was that I could do one day a month, kind of dealing with ongoing stuff because I had contractors running, and so there was a rolling revenue from those. And I didn't really want to kind of lose that just because. So yeah, I kept doing that for quite a few years, and some lessons along the way. The video thing. I don't think anyone's really done that well, and I do still think it's a strong idea. I think nowadays people just do it Gonzo style. You wouldn't, you just do it in house. So you have, a colleague talk about what you need and why you need it. But I still think it's kind of underutilized, and I could imagine a LinkedIn experience where, the job ads that are on there are videos rather than just text. It doesn't make sense. The technology's come on so far now. From
Yeah.
that first meeting at the RAF or the converted army building or whatever that I was in that office, we used to take it in turns to go on the internet computer. Like literally, that was what it was called, the internet, and we would fax CVs. So that's how it was so crazy. And I was just at the pinch point where that email started becoming ubiquitous.
So yeah, you've gone made a success out of the recruitment business. The
Yeah,
video, I guess, kind of didn't take off. Now I suppose you do it all through TikTok, wouldn't you?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Careers on TikTok, and then yeah, you kind of came out with that. And I think the next thing I heard from you is that you were starting a creative agency.
Yeah, so this is, I guess, and this is where Ignite came to play. So what I would add to all of this, Alex, is that I've always done things
Yes.
extracurricularly as well. From the sports stuff. So I enjoyed the kind of playing rugby and playing football or playing golf or whatever it is. But then, moreover, the creative stuff I've tried to be involved with. So I started Instagram as Cardiff, and Instagram as Wales. So that was a
Hmm.
kind of a walking or a club where you'd meet up once a month and have a stroll around. And that they took off and did really well, and we had some really good bunch of people there that enjoyed that passion around photography primarily, but the app allowed it to be funneled. And I really enjoyed that. Meeting again. It's about meeting new people,
Yeah.
improving things for them. Started the book club, and so Cardiff Red back in 2010. I was there, and so that's now Cardiff's longest running book club, and so it's another kind of a creative exploit. But all of this stuff just creates circles upon circles upon circles of people that I'm connected with and
Yeah.
go through one thing or another. And when I cycle to school with the kids don't realize it, because if this ever happened, I would understand it in Blaenau, where you say hello to every other person. But
Mm.
in Cardiff, that's quite different.
Yeah.
And I sound like I'm blowing my own trumpet here, and in a way I am. But there's 2 decades worth of basically connecting with people around you.
Yes.
And there's a huge amount of value in that. Whilst it has been work stuff that has done it, I guess for the creative agency, so it's called Small Joys, that was started because of doing Ignite. And so Ignite was started by other people way more talented and intelligent than I. So Neil Cocker and Claire Wally.
Could you give us a bit of a run through as to what was Ignite?
Yeah, sorry. So you kind of it's such a big part of my life, I guess, or not a big part, but it's such an important part of my life that I think that people are completely au fait with it. But so Ignite was an evening of, we used to do 10 talks, and each talk was 5 minutes long, and that consisted of 20 slides, each one of which would stay up for 15 seconds. They would automatically flip on. So the challenge as one of the speakers, and you could speak about anything or everything, there was no theme or topic, and we had some a kind of a cross section of speakers, shall we say?
Yeah.
Some who were cross and some who should be sectioned. Um, but I loved them, and I loved hosting it, and I loved introducing those people onto the stage. Of course, yours was one of my favourites, and I think you delivered it brilliantly. It was a really good one, and I'm not just saying that. And so that went from 60 people upstairs in O'Neill's, rattling around in a big old space up there when we took it on. And I've got to say here, Ed Barnett was the primary propulsion for this. We then decided as a group, and I should name check the others. So there's Mark from Carolo, James Hardin, who did the video stuff for us, Miranda, who did the social, and James, who did the PR stuff as well. And we went from there over to what was then the old Porters, or sorry, was the new Porters, but it's now the old
Now the
Porters.
old Porters, yeah.
And we went from, in no time at all, we scaled that to like 180 people. And I remember after doing, I think, about 10 of them there, and it was bi-monthly, they were free. But after 10 of them, the tickets sold out in something like 21 seconds. So and we had over 500 people on the site trying to buy tickets at the time. So
Yeah.
we went from there to Glee Club. So capacity went from 180 to about 450, and we were filling the Glee Club every other month. And
Yeah.
so from the Glee Club, we finished. So the Ignite 30. So we went to the Donald Gordon Theatre. So from 450 people to 1,800 people, and that was charged. That was £5 a person, and all of the money that we made went to charity. But we filled that, and at that, the mic drop was, we're done. That's the end of it. But also, Ed proposed to the lovely Gemma, and she said yes on stage in front of 1,800 people. And so that was a huge kind of momentum shift for me in terms of, and genuinely, this is a little embarrassing to say, but I had moments where people would come up to me and go, "Hi, Steve." No idea who they are, and I'd been on the stage and they'd been in the crowd, and people just kind of feel they know you, and that, and this person had come to like 7 or 8 of them, and at 3 different venues or whatever it was, but I had no idea who they were. So Ignite was amazing, and we had some really emotional moments, but the whole piece there was, and this isn't why I did it. I did it for the love of it. I absolutely loved doing that, and I miss it regularly. I have pangs of bittersweet joy when I think about it.
Why did you give it up?
We gave it up because it was a lot of work, and we were all busy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Ed, kind of like me, with the second child arriving and wanting to start my own business. Ed was getting married, wanting to start a family. I think we were all. James Harding was, I think, doing something with his business. James Davis was had just got engaged and was moving to Newport. So things were just generally kind of transitioning away from
Right.
being this, and it was a pretty crazy night. Yeah, so I rarely got home early,
Yeah.
and regularly got home messy. So it would, it took its toll, and that got passed on, and others have tried to kind of continue it with greater or lesser success. But the whole point of this is that Ignite connected me to many, many more people than I could have through, let's say, the recruitment work. Um, but then Cardiff Red connected me to people, and they overlapped with other people. And then the Instagrammers Cardiff connected me to people. And then I got involved with Creative Mornings Cardiff. And so I would urge everyone to, if you've got a real interest and a passion for something, it's a really good idea to start a side project or a thing where you're at the center of it,
Mm-hmm.
because then people will come to you and you become renowned for that thing. And if you want to succeed in a creative space, then doing a creative thing that is not for profit, or just doing it because you can do it, is a really good idea, and you learn so much through doing it as well. And and I've still got a long way to go, but I think that the stagecraft from my side of the stuff, I honed over time, and I got better, and some things fell flat, some things were great. Um, but I can now stand in front of thousands of people and talk without an ounce of fear, without any nerve. Well, there's nerves, of course, there's nerves, but I don't worry about it because I know I can make it through, and that was what Ignite gave me. Um, and that allowed me then. So the other thing is that whilst you were one of the speakers, another one was a guy called Mark Thomas. Mark was a kind of grad from Cardiff School of Journalism, and amazing with words, good with design, handy with development. So a bit of a polymath, and he was working at Morgan Arcade at the time. Morgan Arcade's landlord decided to double their rent overnight. None of the people in the studio could afford to stay there. And Mark said, "Right, I've been thinking about it for a while. This is the nudge I need. I'm going to start my own agency. I can build the websites, I can write the copy, I can design stuff, but I can't sell. I need someone who can sell. Can you sell for me?
Okay.
And that was how Small Joys came to be. Geez, that took about 10 minutes.
It's right. It's so good. I mean, Ignite was a big part of that, and Ignite, I feel like you definitely have to include Ignite in your story because, as you say,
Well,
it was
yeah, that's a fair point.
such a large part of what you did, and it happened in parallel with all the
Yeah.
other like a lot of the stuff that was happening at the time. But that sort of conversation with Mark was it. Did Mark get in touch with you and say, "Hi, Steve, I'm starting an agency. I need you to sell some stuff for me," or was it more of a he didn't just put the message out into the ether, like how open to having a chat with people. He came to you directly.
No, he came to me,
Yeah.
and that was it. And I think I was in one of those. Who's the guy who did the book about say yes to everything? I can't remember, but I was in one of those kinds of places. And I think generally I'm one of those people anyway. And I have to get better at saying no, but I don't know. It doesn't half kind of give you some treats along the way. So yeah, Mark and I decided to kind of give it a go. I managed to get Visit Wales to allow us to launch their Instagram platform, their offering on Instagram, and so we did some campaign work with Visit Wales. We did some stuff with WJEC, so not really sexy, but just a bit of design and a rebranding piece of work there, and that was using a contact that I had from my recruitment days.
Yeah.
So I used to recruit for WJC. And the interesting one that we didn't quite get was we tried to get the Big Lunch, which is a thing sponsored by the Eden Project. And
Okay.
it was basically that you can close the roads and everyone takes their tables out into the road and you basically your street has a big lunch together
Oh,
and it
nice.
happens every June. And it's and they were and so it was exciting for us because what they were realizing was that after doing it for kind of like a decade, it was mainly Guardian reading tree huggers that were into it, but they wanted to kind of get different types of people involved. And so they wanted to do a social campaign. And our idea was about, people meeting at the big lunch that wouldn't normally meet.
Okay.
And so we created these kind of videos, and it was so much fun filming this. One of them was basically this guy looking down the camera and saying, "I'll never forget it. We used to catch our eyes, passing on the street, and putting out the bins and that kind of stuff. There was just a bit of electricity there, and I knew that I felt it, and I hoped that she felt it, and da 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 da. And then he's basically talking about like, and then the big lunch came, and then I met Margaret, and so basically we got this 23-year-old bloke
Okay.
and literally my kids sorry, my ex-wife's auntie Marion, her old neighbor, I think she was 75.
Right.
And he's there holding hands with Margaret, and it's like, and it's just been bliss ever since. And we wanted for them to kiss at the end. And
Not up for it.
well, and it was just all a bit too like much. But basically, what we went for was like a cut to black, and then I said the boy said, I say boy, the young man said, even the sound of her. No, there was something about her, the sound of her teeth in the glass, and so the night the kind of cut to black, and then it was just the sound of false teeth
Clink.
dropping into a glass of
Yeah.
water. Um, so we did that, and we had another one where it was Russian dolls. So all these people who like dressing up as Russian dolls, and they were all sat on a bench together,
Oh,
all wearing the same clothes but just slightly smaller.
slightly smaller as they go down the
Yeah,
bench. Yeah.
and then a mime who met a woman who spoke really, really quickly, and so this a Mark dressed up as a mime with the white gloves and the white paint on the face and the beret and the striped top, and we got this girl to like speak super fast, and Mark was just kind of doing his mime impression. So it was such a cool project, and we had the script signed off, and then ultimately, and this was a real sad one for me, was that Eden Project kind of said, "We're not going to do it. We're not going to put it out. It's too edgy, and it's too risky." And the idea with Small Joys was that every project we worked on, we would add a little piece that wasn't paid for.
Right.
So there would be a small joy, And so even for that one, we created for the Eden project, we created a Spotify playlist that was kind of like, I don't know, full of all sad songs about you leaving us, and we kind of sent that over, like no bad feelings. But yeah, Small Joys was the launch pad for other stuff then as well.
Because yeah, obviously, for you went from Small Joys, and then was it a side project of Small Joys, DooPoll, or Do Loop as it was?
Yeah, what happened was the WJEC gave us a brief to do a few different bits of work, and one of them was a rebrand, and we'd kind of gone through a whole branding process, which was pretty detailed, and it was all with the marketing director and people within the marketing team. It all gone pretty well, and we put in this kind of solution that we'd offered to them, and that was all fine. And then a week later, she called up to say that we were going to have to wait because somebody on the board had to give it the once over. And this person on the board was off on a skiing holiday, and they got back, 2 weeks later, and said, "I don't even like the name."
Right.
And so we were literally back to square one. And we realised, and it had happened on a few other bits and bobs, where people who weren't in the room
Mm.
had a massive impact and influence on whether our work got signed off. And so we had some great times working with a guy called Sam Gowdy, developer. And we basically what we said was, why can't we create like a simple survey thing where people can answer anonymously, and ask them to send it out to everyone in the organization, rather than us just speaking to the marketing team. Let's get input from everyone, and then when we present something, if they say, "Oh, I don't like the name," we can say, "Well, 80% of your staff chose that as their favorite name." And it was genuinely like a tiny little web app that that we started with, which was a simple survey platform. We were building it with a JavaScript platform, that operated in real time, and that was a kind of benefit that we hadn't thought about. So suddenly it had this functionality where you could get instant answers. So we were in a meeting then with University of Swansea School of Management, and actually this was the meeting that got us funding. So, so we're in this meeting. We're pitching for like creative projects with Swansea School of Management, and our idea was a kind of circular, in a common room area, to have a circle of exercise bikes with desks on them, so that students could kind of exercise, power their own laptops whilst looking at each other and seeing each other and having a conversation.
Sounds like a bit of a power stance kind of thing, like staring at someone while you're pedaling as hard as you can. I'm
Yeah.
gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. It'd be a bit intense, I feel.
So anyway, of course, it's an awful idea, and they were just
Okay.
like, "No." But during the meeting, we kind of said, "Oh, well, this is how we would gather feedback,"
Mm.
and they said, "Oh my god, but this is amazing."
Right. Okay.
And they, "Is this yours?" And we're like, "Yeah, it is actually." And he said, "Oh, so show it me again." And so we then kind of riffed and come up with, and by the end of the meeting, they had agreed to pay us 3.5 grand a month to have this platform and be able to use it with students. So we were just like, "Oh my god," we were hoping to get 5K, and then and of course all the costs to deliver that project. And we came away with this other thing. So then we kind of sat in a Starbucks, and we're just like, well, actually, maybe this should become the, the main event. So fast forward a few months, we kind of pulled together a prototype. We were thinking, yeah, we should probably try to get investment. I contacted a guy I knew, who I knew was pretty well off, and basically demoed it to Conrad.
Okay.
There's a funny story here in that we were on Skype, and in the midst of it, my son, yeah, he did his business in quite a phenomenal way. I got up off the sofa, put the laptop down, not realizing I'd put the laptop down facing, the scene of the crime. So Conrad then had to watch me changing my son's nappy in the middle of a pitch.
I feel like there's worse
But
things.
we still got it. So then fast forward another couple of months later, and yeah, we basically having pre money. We
Hmm.
had a promise of 3.5 grand a month from Swansea University. No other customers to speak of, and we got 300 grand valuing us at 1 million, which was crazy looking back. But at the time, it felt very real, and we were believing our own hype.
Because I think at the time that was what, around 2013, 2014.
2014 we started. 2015, I think we incorporated.
Yeah, so that was like peak startup. I don't want to say like, .com 2.0 bubble, but there was a definite sense I always felt about, there were companies getting funded left, right, and center. There was money, there was
Yeah,
a lot of money flying around from VCs, from angel investors, and it was very much there was a lot of excitement going around at that time of apps are a big thing, startups are a big thing, startup culture was a big thing. Money was cheaper to borrow, and at that time, yeah, there was this like a definite sense of excitement in Cardiff
yeah,
around the startup world.
100%. That's very much the kind of scenario we found ourselves in. I think that aligned to it then in the following years become the co-working boom, and there were co-working places popping up left, right, and centre. But I remember in our dealings with DevBank, Warren Forvell had gone through and raised money for, I can't remember
Nudged.
what, Nudge, that was it. Um, and he had been pretty condemning of the paperwork basically that was involved. All credit to him, because what was then Finance Wales had a real rethink of, for seed funding of small businesses, do we really need all of this? And so it got pared back to minimal paperwork,
Okay.
to the point where our angel investor was a bit blown away by like how little DevBank were asking for, in terms of securities and whatnot. So it was a really quick process, and yeah, it was quite a um, humbling experience, really. Just having that faith put in you. But we flew straight into making massive mistakes. So our first hire for a brand new software company was a salesperson with zero experience of selling software, and only previous job was as a fine art salesperson. We brought in account manager within a few months. We didn't have any accounts. We didn't even have a customer, and and we made a bunch of different mistakes. But also we did some good stuff. Yeah, so we started selling. We tidied up the product. We went through feature releases. Pretty directionless, though, I would say. We were, let's just build and build, and then we'll see what sticks. But we got some good wins. I think a year or so later we won the Sir Michael Moritz Startup of the Year, beaten out Amplify and I think Wealthify, who clearly went on to bigger and better things. So it was a good fun start. Many challenges ahead.
Yeah, because then I guess you do poll. Well, it started off as do loop, which then has to change to do poll, I believe, because of a
Yeah,
trademark dispute,
yeah.
which was a shame because do poll is it's an ambigram. Um,
Do
so
Loop was an
do
ambigram.
yes,
Yeah,
do loop is an ambigram, but do poll is not.
yeah.
But there we go.
And somewhere I've still got the scribbles of where we were trying to come up with how to design it. And yeah, I think basically it was the German version of MTV is called Dulup, and we got a cease and desist from them early on, and we were just like, okay, this is not a hill I'm going to die on.
Yeah, yeah, we can. We'll give up the name. It's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you ran that for was it 3 years, 3 4 years?
Well, in total, so 2015, and then ended up, selling next in last year, so 8 years in total.
8 years.
Um,
Wow.
yeah, so I started it in my 30s,
Mm-hmm.
and finished it what feels like about 3 decades later.
Right.
Um, yeah,
Yeah, because of course over the running of DooPoll, DooPoll. Sam left
Yeah.
fairly early on, and then of course Mark left after the what should have been the big success, but turned into quite a headache for you, I believe, with the newspaper deal.
That's an interesting one. I think as ever, there's different versions of stories, aren't there? And so yeah, Sam left after just 2 years or so. Moved on. We had a guy called James Hardin, a different one from the Ignite one, I should add, that was our developer at that point, and James manfully stepped up and took that kind of lead technical role. Mark and I then, took things forward, and obviously there was a supporting cast of many as well. But COVID, you know, really hit us hard. I think we were struggling a little in terms of direction and what was going to work pre-COVID, but COVID was a real hammer blow for us. We lost a lot of business pretty quickly as people looked at their outgoings and said, right, what is business critical? And we fell into that nice to have category rather than business critical. So alongside that, though, we were making inroads with Wales Online, whose parent company is Reach, and Reach run about 270 different versions of Wales Online, basically. So in COVID, we agreed to do a trial with them on the basis that if it went well, we'd kind of switch over and have a contract with them. And we ran what was the biggest private company survey of people in the UK with about COVID. So in the space of 6 days, we had over 22 million answers replied by over 400,000 people. And we
Wow.
gathered nearly 50,000 emails for Reach, which was way infinitely more than we had done in the 7 years or 6 years preceding that. And in the build up to this, there was a fun moment where we put a survey on the Wales Online page for the Wales versus England game. And James shut the website down because he thought we were under DDS attack. And he was just like, there's literally thousands of people trying to answer a survey at once. And like something's going on. I don't know what it is. And we're like, this is exactly what we want.
Yeah. This is actually the desired outcome of what we're trying to achieve.
That was the kind of first bit. We then did something with the leader debate with Boris Johnson and the likes. And that went really well. And then, so that gave us the pass then to do a bigger piece across the whole kind of, or not the whole estate, but we did it across 90 different websites in total, I think. So yeah, suddenly we had a situation where we had all this data, and I was delighted. I was just like, we have proven that this thing can work at scale. And, getting nearly 500,000 people to take part is a massive achievement. 22 million answers is incredible. Well done, us. This is good work. Then Reach said, "Well, we're a newspaper ultimately, and Boris Johnson is going to be doing something on Friday, so we need this stuff by Thursday." And we were like, "Okay, we'll do that." And then realized we could not get the data out of our servers. So it was way more, and we'd been paying AWS whatever we'd been paying them to kind of scale and scale and scale, but then we didn't have any infrastructure or software basically capable of getting all of that data out. And so we ended up then paying a small fortune to us at that point to DevOps Group, who were absolutely brilliant. You get what you pay for, and with them it was top notch. And they got that data out for us, but it was a period when we didn't have a lot of money at bank, and so using a load of money to get data out for a project we weren't getting paid for was a painful experience. And I think when Mark has told this story, that's the bit that sticks in his craw. For me, I look back and I would still have done it again, because it was, we wanted to prove that we could achieve it. I only wish that we had been able to do it 3, 4, 5 years earlier when we had more money at bank. And so yeah, but that was a real kind of, and that's the roller coaster you're on as an entrepreneur. Yeah, is you get those moments, and there's real highs. I remember when we signed a contract with O2, and it was just amazing that O2 were going to be using and we had the UK CEO of O2 using DooPoll in his presentations and stuff like that. I look back on and think, F yeah, that's pretty cool. And for me, as I've said a few times, a rugby buff, we were using DooPoll in the Principality Stadium in the VIP lounges to engage with the audiences there, and TV presenters would be kind of quoting or commenting on the answers. And I got to watch. It's Wales versus Scotland, isn't it? In a week or so, I got to watch Wales versus Scotland with Ian McGeechan, just he and I, and a bottle of red wine. If we hadn't started DooPoll, I would never have had that experience. And so I look back with bittersweet memories of it all. But there are moments like that where you think, yeah, this is you can't forget those for all those troughs. You've got to remember the peaks as well.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. And then you ended up in a position where you sold.
Yeah. So Mark, unfortunately, yeah, Mark had some kind of personal stuff happening at the end of 21 and furloughed, needed to furlough himself. I think that gave him time to take stock, and he was approached about a role, and he was due back, and a week before that, called and said, "Look, I'm going to take this other job." So for me, that was pretty tough, and quite challenging. But you understand, people got to do what they got to do. So James, it left James and I at that point, and we were threadbare at that point, running on fumes. And I made the choice to look to sell it. We listed it on a few different places. Micro Acquire, or Acquire as it's now known, was where we had some interest. Interestingly, we got an inquiry or an expression of interest from the guys at Hopin, who
Know that.
were a real kind of boom and bust organization. They kind of did, I guess, like a competitor to Zoom during COVID, and they got shed loads and shed loads of investment. They went on a massive acquisition thing, and so the CEO of Hopin expressed an interest, and I was desperate to get him to agree to look at it. But sadly, no dice. We engaged with a kind of agent to try and sell it for us, and it was a pretty protracted process all in all. And this agent, having had an agreement with them, I think it was a 6-month agreement, and they got to the last week and they said, "Oh, we've got someone," and they're UK based, and I was like, "Okay, great." We spoke to them, and then ultimately the offer they were making was like 20% of what we got from Question Pro. And so Question Pro, yeah, we found us through MicroAcquire. Really good experience with all of the people there, pretty straight up. We knew they were pretty clear about what they wanted from us, and what they were willing to offer, and didn't deviate from that, to be fair. And it was a bit of a fire sale in the end because of the impact that COVID had on our ARR, our annual recurring revenue. But still something I look back on with pride, and I think it's good that we got an exit, because so many don't. Yeah, 97% of startups fail, crash and burn, and don't get to that place. And whilst the return to the investors isn't what they would have hoped for, when they put the money in, you know, I I think that we gave it our best shot, and I look back and think, yeah, we might have done things differently, but I don't think we failed through lack of endeavour.
No, no, no. And I think you say about the investors, they didn't get the money back they were expecting. As an investor, as someone who is investing in businesses, that's the risk you've got to take. Like don't they say that if you invest in 10 startups, then you can realistically expect 9 of them to fail.
Yeah.
But you're looking for that one, the one that does succeed massively. So as long as it's not a failure, I could imagine a lot of investors are fairly happy about getting money back. So you sell the company, I guess. What happens then? You kind of out in the world, you're free man. You take the job with Awen. What was your thinking then? Did you think I'm gonna start something new, or were you just looking forward to a bit of a going to the world of employment?
Yeah, so I think in these circumstances, it's a good time to take stock, isn't it? And you kind of look back and think about where you've come from, where you're going to. What's the Bill Gates thing? He kind of says, you overestimate what you can do in a year, underestimate what you can do in 10. And I think that's maybe where I was at. I was thinking back about why I'd done what I'd done, and yeah, there were all the moments where Mark had approached me and said, I need someone who can do this. Similar thing with Neil and Claire with Ignite. We want to move on. But then I look at DooPoll and I think the driving force for me through running DooPoll was to be an example to my children as they were growing up of you can go and do your own thing. You don't have to join that management consultancy and be on the climbing the greasy pole because in 20 years you could have my job. You don't have to do that. You live in a world now where you can start your business, and so my literally my 10-year-old has been by making bracelets, and she's basically looking to create a little shop that she sells bracelets to her friends. And I look back at DooPoll and think, well, if I've inspired that one way or another, then I'm proud of that. I'm prouder of that than I am of what happened with the business itself. I then was taking stock and thinking, right, well, what do I want next? And I will say one of the elements was financial security or stability, sorry, I should say. DooPoll, the exit, by no means am I talking to you now from a gold yacht. Um, so there was the other pressing need of paying the mortgage. Let's be clear here. It might have looked good on the socials, but actually the realities are that I needed to get back into employment. And then I thought about, well, what do I want now? What do I want to my children to see me as? And so I go back then to that purpose for Awen is making people's lives better,
Mm-hmm.
and that's I felt where they've matured. They've seen me go through and do the DooPoll thing, and now there's a chance here for me to lead in a role where I'm leading a company that is trying to help people and serve people. And yeah, it sounds a bit righteous, but that is genuinely like the main driver is I want to work for a company where it is about profit, but that profit gets put into really good use, and it isn't about returns to investors or shareholders or any of that stuff. It's about just making people who, by and large, have much more challenging lives than us, making their lives a little or hopefully a lot better. And I knew obviously that it was I will say this for any kind of startup owners listening, it's not a quick process. So there's still bits and bobs that need to be tied off with the DooPoll stuff. And yeah, I'm now a year on from when we announced the sale or thereabouts. Yeah, so and it took 6 months to get there as well, with all that kind of false hope with the Hopin founder and all of that. You jump through a lot of hoops. So yeah, I think the two elements were that stability of having a regular salary, and also not having to worry about paying other people. So whenever you run your own business, that is perennially front of your mind. And we always paid our staff first at DooPoll. Yeah, so Mark, Sam, and I, maybe Sam had left too early, but Mark and I definitely didn't pay ourselves whilst we were paying others. Yeah, being able to actually and make contributions to this thing called a pension. And oh yeah, and have allocated, and to discover and actually know when the bank holidays in a year are. These are all new things to me. And actually be on leave and not look at your email and know that you can do that. Know that someone's got your back and the world's not going to burn if you don't do it. So they're kind of, I would say they're the main reasons.
Okay, so like I guess how did this job come up? You just was it advertised online? You were browsing and thought, oh, give it a go.
Yeah, that's it. So actually, I'll say more on the Awen one, but broadly, I applied for 34 jobs before I got the Awen one. I in total, I think I had 5 interviews, so 29 that I didn't even get close to, and I thought pretty interesting CV, but clearly not. I spoke to someone the other night, and they were saying, "Oh, I've tried for 6 and I haven't got anything," and I was just like, "Well, you know, you got to kiss a lot more frogs before you find your prince." And there's no shame in that. Yeah, it's people need what they need, and if your CV doesn't catch it, then I don't want to be too kind of what will be. But yeah, there is a bit of the universe at play, and so the Awen job was interesting in that 2 weeks previous they'd advertised for trustees, and Awen, I should add to were a DooPoll customer, and I'd met the CEO a few times. Really, really liked the cut of his jib. Thought he was a really switched on bloke. So yeah, actually, maybe I can do something here. because I'm transitioning out of DooPoll. And obviously at that point he didn't know it, but I messaged him saying this is potentially of interest. And then about a fortnight later they advertised for a commercial director, and I said, just about that expression of interest in the trustee role, I'd like to renege on that and go for this one that's going to be able to pay me a stable salary and allow me to do what I do best and make a difference in the world. So yeah, I got that. I got that offer. I got two offers, and the other offer I won't say who it was from, but it was for 20 grand more, and I opted for Awen, and I definitely made the right decision. The other one was staying in tech, and I wish those people, if they do ever listen to this, I'm sure that they're going to be flying without me anyway. But I look back with no regrets. It's
Yeah. I think tech is definitely something that is quite all encompassing for quite a lot of people. It drags you, it sucks you in, and can drag you down if you're not careful. So having that kind of escape from it is what a lot of people need. I think it's great that you've kind of stepped away from it and into more of the things that you find interesting, and knowing that you can inspire your kids in such a way is, yeah, it's a great feeling. So what does a day to day look like for you as a commercial director? What does that actually involve?
a lot of it. I'm part of the executive leadership team, so our role as an ELT is driving the strategy for the organisation, choosing the direction we're going to take, and then obviously disseminating that out to the staff that work with us. We've got over 100 full-time staff, and about the same again in terms of casual staff that work at our cafes, restaurants, bars, and whatnot. So it's primarily looking at the future as much as the present and the past, and deciding, what trajectory we're going to take. So a quick example would be that we run Bringaru House for the last 8 years. That's run as a wedding venue. So it's a beautiful 17th century country house in 100 acres. Yet this building was getting used on a Saturday and Sunday, and literally Monday to Friday,
Empty.
nothing happened.
Yeah, yeah,
It's got 19 bedrooms. And so you may have seen, we've been advertising for a hotel manager.
yeah.
And so we're looking to transition that, like basically sweat the asset, I guess, is, in commercial terms. It's
Okay.
like, okay, well, why isn't that being utilized as well as it could be? So that's a kind of simple, direct, easy to address, and we can get working on that pretty quickly. More longer term and looking into the future is how do we become a much more sustainable and circular organization? We already create about 43 megawatt hours a year in terms of solar panels and stuff like that. But we could be doing so much more. And we've got a great relationship with Bridgend Council. So one element, and I've had meetings this week, is about, right, how do we create a solar farm? Could we create basically a renewable energy visitor attraction that demonstrates how you create solar energy, how you run a wind turbine, how you do ground source heat, how you do air source, and so whilst using that energy within the park and at the house ourselves, and then obviously distributing, whatever we don't use, or storing and using batteries. So there's elements like that, and then also, our supply chain, looking at our supply chain and how can we improve what we do there. So on that land, we currently grow some apples, and we have an apiary, so we have a bit of honey every now and then. So we have a kitchen that now and then will serve something with some apples in and the odd kind of spoonful of honey on things. Well, we could be doing vegetables and much more fruit and even livestock. Is that something that we can do to be much more commercially successful?
Hmm.
Because if we're not paying Castell Howell or butchers or whoever else for that stuff, and we're making it ourselves, obviously that would be cost effective. But also in terms of the environment, we're having much less impact. A few quick examples. Beyond that, it's about looking at the developments we have going on. So we are fortunate enough to have been successful in levelling up funding. And we've got three major capital projects happening. So we're redeveloping Porthcawl Grand Pavilion, £20 million project, Maesteg Town Hall, about 9 million project, and a Mooney in Pontypridd, about £5 to £6 million project. And so it's what are they going to look like when they reopen? How are they going to run commercially? What offering are we going to have? How is that going to be programmed? So it's looking after all of those elements. It's a really multifaceted role, and sometimes it's quite daunting, but then other times it's super exciting. And the people, I've got to say, the people are just phenomenal. And it's cliche, but they make an organisation, don't they? And the team I've got around me are just really great to work with. We've definitely got our challenges, as does everyone, in the food and beverage industry.
Mm.
You only have to look at the Conway,
Smokehouse.
social standard,
Yeah.
Kindle. They're dropping like flies at the
Mm.
moment. It is super super tough.
Yeah.
So if anyone's listening, go and eat, drink, and be merry at an independent. That hard money you're earning. Yeah, go and support a local independent wherever you are, because they bloody need your help more than ever right
Yeah,
now.
yeah. There's a lot of places that need a lot of help at the moment. So yeah, I guess support independence and shop local where you can. Amazing. Thank you so much, Steve, for taking us through your journey. One final question before we finish is: if you could go back, do it all again, start from scratch, would you do anything differently about how you've gone on this journey? And would you like to have ended up anywhere else?
I would definitely have done shed loads of stuff differently. We could spend another an hour and a half going over what I would have done differently. Do I have regrets? Yeah, I've got some regrets as well. And I look back and I feel sad that I didn't have the bravery to make some decisions at certain points, and glad that I did at others. Would I have wanted to ended up anywhere else? That's an interesting one. I've not really thought of that one. I You can spend too long on that stuff, and I've learned in my dotage that comparisons are unhelpful. And I don't have days where, and I spoke with my partner about this the other day. I don't look enviously at others and think, oh, I wish that I could fly off to Barbados, on a whim to do that, or I wish I had that car, or I wish I lived in that house. I don't have that, and I feel blessed that I'm fortunate enough to feel that way. So I'm pretty happy where I am, both geographically and mentally, emotionally. And yeah, I think that I've given what I've got, and I hope I've made a bit of a difference along the way.
It definitely sounds like it. It sounds like you're in the right place at the moment to continue with that plan of making a difference and helping improve people's lives as you progress on into whatever you do next. You've set yourself up in a position that will allow you to do that. So yeah, sounds like you are exactly where you want to be. Thank you again, Steve. Thanks so much for coming on and having a chat, taking us through all the stuff that you've done.
About, and thanks to everyone who's listened. I hope there's been something of worth in there for you. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm sure Alex will be sharing um, Twitter profiles or whatever else. But
Yeah,
yeah, if I can help anyone, I'm glad to where I can.
Yeah,
Jeff,
I'll drop all your contact details in the episode description, Steve. So yeah, I'll catch you soon, mate. Cheers.
cheers. Bye. Can you edit this bit in? So I had a memory pop up on Facebook today, and it was from 2020 when I was moving house, and so my dad in those kind of later years struggled with his mental health, but he turned to poetry, and um, and I think that's my love of words and language comes definitely from him. And so I had I was sorting out as I was moving house, and a bunch of his poems come up. But there was a pertinent one this morning that I saw, goes, "Can't wait until your teens are past, but understand it goes too fast. You'll speed it up and wish you never, for after that you're dead forever." Um, and I think that the teens are definitely, they're the salad days, aren't they? A top period in anyone's life, and I don't think I'm dead forever at all. That's not my mindset. But
Thanks so much for listening to episode 5. If you've enjoyed all the way through the episode, please consider subscribing to the podcast and leaving a review, maybe even sharing it with your friends. Similarly, if you've got a story you would like to tell, feel free to get in touch. The email address is in the episode description, along with the links to some of the things we've spoken about in the podcast today. I'll be back with another episode on Monday next week, so hopefully you'll be hearing from me again soon. Thanks, bye.